Hello everyone, and so far we've been talking about the library functions, and we all know that the library functions are those functions which are already exist in C++ programming language, but the user defined functions are those functions which are going to be created by the programmer. The programmer is going to create them, or you are going to create them, and the main usability of using these user defined functions is to make your program break down into smaller pieces. You can't write every single statement inside the main function, inside one function. So you need to break down your program into smaller parts or into smaller pieces, and each piece is called a function, and it's going to be defined by you. The name of the function, or the type of the function, or the functionality, the statements inside the function is going to be created by you. You are going to take the control of this kind of function. You know that in the library functions, the functions were already built inside the C++. They had specific operations inside them, such as power function, which calculates the power of any number, or square root, which takes or gives you the result of the square root of a number. They are library functions. They are already defined functions. They have specific functionality, but the user defined functions are those functions which are going to be created by you. You are going to define the function or define the functionality inside the function. So we know that we've got one function inside every single C++ program, which is called the main function, which everything is going to be here. But you can't write every single statement inside this function. Why? Because it gets mess, and you can't take control of it. You can't find where you have written that portion of code. You may have thousands of lines of the code, so you can't find that part of the program which you want to modify or delete or edit or whatever. So the reason of having user defined functions just to make your program clear. You are going to write down specific statements or some clear statements inside one function and some other statements inside another function, so you can call them in the main function. So in the next slides we are going to learn what are they and how to define them and how to call them. So we can say this is our main program, and inside our main program we may have function 1, function 2, function 3, as much as functions you want. Look at here, this is the first slide of defining and calling a function. So each function, each user defined function must have two things: function call and function definition. So what are function definition and function calls? You need to create the function that's called the function definition. So inside this function there may be so many statements or a single statement as well, and inside this function as well there's so many statements can be located inside this function. And whenever we want to use those statements inside this function, we need to call them inside the main function, okay, the main function of the program. So let's consider we've got some statements to take place or to execute inside the main program. This statement is going to be executed, and this one. After this one, we may need to execute those statements inside this function. So we are not going to write the statements here. We are going to write the statements inside the function, then we are going to call the function. This is the way you are calling a function in C++ programming language. And whenever you are defining a function or creating a function, you need to consider those four things, which are the return type, name, parameter list, and the body. The return type means which type of data is going to be returned after the executing of this function. The name of the function is a unique name you need to give to your function, and there are some rules which applies to the name of the function. You can't name the functions randomly, write down 1 underscore a or something like that. You need to follow some rule. You need to give them a proper name. And then the parameter list. Each function may need to pass some parameter, or may need to get or get some parameters from the main function when they are called. So you need to know what are the parameters which are going to be passed into this function. Okay, the return type, the type of the function, the name, the type of the data which is going to be returned by this function, the name of this function, and the parameter list, those parameters or those variables which are going to be passed into this function, and the body. What is the body? The body means those statements which are going to be executed inside this function. So the functionality of this function or the task of this function, what does this function do, which is going to be located inside the body. So this is the structure of function definition. The function return type, which is going to be integer, string, or char, or void, or anything, and then the name of the function, and then those parameters which are going to be passed to this function. And sometimes you may not have any parameter. And what's called here we can write down any statement inside the body of this the function. So from here to here is going to be the body of this function. Look, this is the return type of the function, this is the name of the function, and this one the parameter list, which is going to be placed here, but in this case we don't have any parameter, and these lines are the body of the function. And this is called int main, and the name of the parameters or list of the parameters is called the function header. So we are going to talk about a real life example in the next slides. So what is function return type? If any function returns a value, a data, the type of the value must be indicated. What does that mean? For example, if the function returns an integer value, so the type of the function must be integer, but we may not return any value inside some functions. Okay, like here we are just printing something, we are not returning any data to the main function, so the type is going to be void. Okay, so this is very important whenever we are returning a data, whenever we are returning a data to the main function, so the value or the type of the function is going to be int, and we all know that the main function is integer. Why? Because we are returning 0 at the end. The 0 is an integer value. But here in this function, the type of the function, the name of the function, the list of the parameters, and the body of the function. In this function we are not returning any value, we just printing out this this dummy text, monthly sales, for example. So the function type is going to be void, and we don't need to have any parameter here because we are just printing this value. So let's see what happens if you want to return any value. So before doing that, we are going to talk about the calling a function. You just simply call or write down the name of the function and those parentheses whenever if you got any parameter inside that function or any parameter pass it to that function, the parameters must be located here. So when we are calling this function inside the main function, what happens? The body of this function is going to be executed. Like here, if you write down this print heading in the main function, after the brackets, what happens? The body of the function is going to be executed. Okay, and when the function terminates or the last statement of the function is executed right without any error, the next statement of the main program is going to be executed. Let's see how this flowchart works. Look, start, print hello from main. So this is going to be inside the main function, and we know that this shape inside the flowcharts is used whenever we are calling a function. So we are calling this function. This function may be located somewhere, or it's just a random function, just to explanation here. So what happens in this case, in this line of your program, this function is going to be called. So whatever is inside the body of this function is going to be executed. Okay, whenever this function is done executing, what happens? The program goes back to the next statement inside the main function or the main program, and it's going to be executed back in function main again. Okay, and then the program is going to be terminated. And this one is the pseudo code implementation of the previous flowchart. The program starts, print hello from main. This is a statement inside the main function called display message. So whenever we are calling a function, the program is going to be interrupted, the main program is going to be interrupted, and what happens, it goes to the other parts of the program, or it goes to the outside of the main function and looking for that function display message, and whenever it finds it, it goes to inside the function or to the body of that function and executes every single statement inside that function. So in this case, this is going to be executed first, then by calling this function, this body is going to be executed, which is printing hello from the function display message. Then whenever this is done executing, this function is terminated, the control is going to be returning to the next statement of the main program, which is this one, print back in function main again, and the program is going to be terminated, and the main program is going to be executed, then display message. Let's see what are we going to do inside this already written function inside C++. Look, here we've got include iostream namespace std. So we've got the main function, this is the body of the main function, and the definition of the user defined function, or your function, is going to be outside the main function. So we are defining our function void display message. We are not going to return any data, so the type of the function is going to be void, and this is going to be the body of the function. So we all know that whenever we are compiling a program, the program starts from the top left and then starts executing line by line, but the first thing is going to be executed inside the C++ programming language is the main program. So the first line is executed is this one. So those kind of things are going to be executed first, including that file and using this namespace. But any statement which is executed first is inside the main program. So the control of the program goes to the main function. This statement is executed. After that, this statement is going to be executed, which is calling a function display message. Then the program goes to outside the main function and looking for this function. So it finds this function here. The body of this function is going to be executed. So this one is going to be executed first, hello from main, and then it goes to that program. This statement is going to be executed, hello from the function display message. So it's going to be printed, and whenever this function is terminated, the control is returning back to the line after that calling function, which is cout back in function main again, back in function main again, and return 0. The program is going to be terminated, and we may call several functions inside the main function. In this case, we've got only a single function to be called, but we may have more than one function. So this is the function definition, type of the function, name of the function, body of the function, and this one is the function call, and this is how it executes. So the program is starting executed from the main. This one is going to be executed, and this one, whenever it sees this function calling, it goes to the function, it goes to the outside the main function to find this function. So it comes here to execute that statement or that body of that function. So it's going to be executed. After that, after this function is terminated or it's done executed, and it comes back to the line after calling the function. And this is another example. You are including iostream and cmath in order to use the library functions. So we have this user defined function. Okay, this is the type of the function, which is float, and this is the name of the function, which is distance. So you can give any name, but you need to give it a proper name. So that name, which is which is defining the functionality of the function. So in this case, we have two parameters. Why? Because we need to calculate x and y based on some formula which you are going to be given, or you are going to be finding by yourself. So inside this function, we have so many statements. Float dist. Dist equals to square root, which is a library function inside the CMAS library, and we are taking the square root of this formula, x multiplied by x plus y multiplied by y. So those parameters are going to be passed to this function from the main function. We don't know the value of them yet, because the user defined function is not going to be executed first. The main function is going to be executed first. So you need to give those values, or you need to pass those values from the main function to that function. Then we are returning this. So the type of the function is float, so we need to return a float value. Okay, so the program is coming first to the main function, float x, y, and this. Okay, these x, y, and this are not those x and y and this. They are different. These are inside the main function, and those are inside the user defined function. So we are defining them here, and we may say a, b, and c, or whatever you prefer. So testing function is the inside. This is a dummy test, and this one as well. So we are entering the value of x and y. Look, this is very important. This, which is this variable, equals to what? Equals to distance and those parameters. So you need to be very careful. As much as parameters we have in the header of the function, we need to give those those number of the parameters. In this case, you've got two parameters. We need to pass two parameters. So for example, you are writing 2 and 2, for example, y is 2, and let's say x is 2, y and 3. So this is going to be 2, and this one is going to be 3. Directly the control goes to this function. Why? Because we are calling that function distance. So this x is going to be replaced with that x, which is 2, and this y is going to be replaced with that y, which is 3. So the x is going to be 2 and the y is going to be 3. Why? Because we have entered 2 to x and 3 to y, and then this variable is going to be declared, and it's going to be assigned to this function. Square root of this value, 2 multiplied by 2 is going to be 4, y multiplied by y, 3 multiplied by 3 is going to be 9, 9 plus 4 is going to be 13, and the square root of 13 is going to be assigned to distance and and it returns the data, the value inside that variable, which I'm not sure how much is it, and I think it's going to be 3 points something. And see out this one, distance of this one from this is going to be this. So that variable is not calculated inside the main function. It is going to be calculated inside this function. The variables are going to be declared, and then they are going to be entered, and this one is going to be calculated inside this function, and then we are printing inside the main function. This is how user-defined function and library functions are working inside C++ programming language. Okay, this is a very important subject in programming. You need to break down your main program into smaller pieces in order to make your program understandable. So what are the specifications or the characteristic of calling a function? The main function can call any number of functions, and the functions, the user-defined functions, can call other functions as well. Okay, such as here inside this function, we've called these functions. Okay, so inside each function you can call the other functions, and the compiler must know those kind of these parameters or these features of every single function before it is called. The name of the function, the type of the return, the number of the parameters which is passed to that function, and the data type of each parameter. And we can notify the compiler about a function before call to that function. Like for example, we are just defining the function without the body. This is what's called the prototype of the function. Let's say this example, this is called the function prototype. We are just defining the functions. Void first is a function, void second is another function. So we are just defining the function, and we tell the compiler that we are going to have those functions, and we can avoid this one as well, and we can remove them, but this is what's called the function prototype. And here after the main, apart from the main, we can write down the body of the functions. Void phase, which is already declared here, the body of it is this one, and the body of this function is this one. And the main program is going to be consist of this function and the other one. So this is the same as place prototype near top of your program after the including IO stream and those kind of things. And yeah, that's not very important. Look, in this function we've got void print hi. This is a user defined function. Okay, so this is called the function prototype. And then after the main, outside the main function, we can define that function and write down the body of that function, which is cout hi. So apparently, and inside the main function we've got this statement and calling that function print hi. So it directly comes to the body of the function. So the body of the function is executed next, and then the program is the control of the program is going to be returned back to that part which the main program left, which is cout tested, and then the program is going to be terminated. So another type of the function is that function which takes some parameters. For example, this is a library function which has two parameters, a and b. So those a and b are two different variables which are going to be used inside that function, and those values are called arguments, and the variables which hold the values are called parameters. So let's have an example. For example, void display message int num. So what is inside the body cout, the value is num. So whatever is inside this argument is going to be inside this variable is going to be printed here. So the num is parameter, and this function is accepting only one integer variable. Okay, so from the main function, when we are calling this function, you need to pass a parameter or pass an integer variable with calling the function. So let's say what we have here. We have the function prototype print hi, but we have a parameter which is an integer variable. So we are going to write down our function, our defined function print hi. So we need to get a parameter. So int I, and for I equals to 0, this is another variable defined inside that function. For int I equals to 0, I is smaller than n. So this n is that n which is here. So far we don't know the value of the n, so the I is going to be incremented by 1. So as much as is the value is the n, the hi is going to be printed. But let's see how it works. The program starts from the main int n, cout this one, we are entering n. So for example, let's say n is 5. Okay, we are entering 5 to n, print hi n. So this parameter, this n which is 5, is going to be passed to this function. Why? Because we are calling this function. So this function is going to be called with passing this parameter. So this 5 is going to be placed here. Okay, if we got two parameters, we need to pass two parameters here. But in this case, our function has only one parameter, so we need to pass a parameter to that function. So this 5, which is already entered in the cin statement, is going to pass to this variable. So this n is going to be that 5. At the beginning, we are entering the 5 from the main, and we are passing the 5 by calling the function, and this 5 is going to be this one, and this n is going to be this 5. Okay, this is how you are passing a parameter to a function. So this is the structure of the program. Main program, passing n to that function. Okay, this function is working with the main program, but the main program must pass the n variable or the n parameter to that function. Another example, this is the function prototype. See out this one, display value 5. Okay, so this 5 is going to be passed to this function. So instead of int n, we've got 5 here. Okay, so n is 5, the value is n. So what is n? Is 5. Why? Because we have said that pass this 5 into that variable, so the data is inside this variable is going to be 5. So whenever we are using the prototype of the function, the data type of the each parameter inside the function, or which is going to be passed to that function, is going to be indicated inside the parentheses between those two parentheses. For example, void even or odd, this is the name of the function, and this function accepts one parameter, which is going to be the type of the data which is going to be accepted. But in the header, if you are defining the header or declaring the function, what is going to be accepted? The name of the variable and the type of the variable. And in the calling the function, only the value or the variable is going to be passed. So you need to be careful about those three things. In the prototype, only the type of the variable or the parameter is going to be written. In the header, the type and the variable. In the call, only the value, which is going to be a hard-coded variable or the variable name. So this is a class exercise. I prefer to talk about it here. This is the function prototype. Okay, it tells you what is going to be the output of this program. So int main, this one is going to be executed first. Int num, declaration of this variable. For num equals to 0, num is smaller than 10, num is going to be increment. So we know that. How does for loop work? Show double num. So this num is going to be passed to that variable. Okay, to that function. This num, which is a variable, is going to be passed to that function. So that means this function must accept a parameter which its type is integer. So this num is going to be replaced with that value. So at the beginning, the num is going to be 0. So we call that function to 0. So here the value is going to be 0, and then cout 0, cout 0 multiplied by 2, which is going to be 0 again. Okay, so num is going to be 1. It's going to be incremented by 1, so it's going to be 1. So show double num. At this time, 1 is going to be passed to that function. So the value is going to be 1. And this iteration is going to be repeated until the num is going to be less than 10. Okay, so 10 times this function is going to be called, and then system post return. And we may have multiple arguments or multiple parameters to be passed to a function. So the functions may accept multiple parameters. So the number of the arguments in the call must match the prototype and the definition of the function. For example, this function may accept 3 parameters. So when we are calling that function, we must pass 3 parameters. So if it is 4, if it is 2, we need to pass the equal parameters to that function. Okay, so the first argument will be used to initialize the first parameter. The first one is going to be replaced with the first one in the function, and the second one to the second one. We've got this function here, void show sum int. That means this is a function which its name is show sum, and the type is void, and it has 3 parameters, int. Both 3 of them are integer type. So in the main function, we've got those 3 variables. For example, into 3 integers, we are going to enter them. Then we are calling this function. We know that this function is accepting 3 parameters, and each of them must be integer. So we show some value 1, value 2, value 3. So in the calling function, void show sum int a, int b, int c. This value is going to replace this a. So whatever we have entered, value 1 is going to be replaced with a. So b is going to be replaced with value 2, c is going to be replaced with value 3. So the sum is going to be value 1 plus value 2 plus value 3, which is a and b and c. So those values we are passing by calling the function, we are passing it to the function by calling it, are going to be replaced with the parameters of the function. Okay, so this one with this one, this one with this one, with this one with this one. Then the sum is going to be calculated by adding those 3 values together. Like here, we are calling the function and we are passing those 3 values whenever whatever we've got inside the function or inside the head of the function are those integer parameters. So this one is going to be replaced with that one and that one and that one. Okay, so but we are calculating the nums. Why? Because the num one is holding that value, and that value is already initialized with an integer value first, and this one as well, this one as well. Then the function is going to calculate based on those parameters which have been passed to those variables. Okay, so what is passing data by a value and by reference? So what happens when an argument is passed to a function, its value is copied into the parameter. That value which we are passing to that function is going to be held inside that parameter which I've already defined in the parameter list of that function. So whatever we are changing the name of the parameter inside the function, it doesn't affect the value of that function. Look at here, for example, we've got this function. This is the head of the function which accepts an integer value, an integer parameter. So we are printing this. So let's say the program starts from here, m equals to 612. See out this one, see out this one, and we are calling that function, and we need to pass a parameter of integer. So this m, which is 612, is going to be passed to that function. So n is going to be 612. So this n will be replaced with that m. This is how we are passing data by value. So let's see here, inside the main function m equals to that value, whenever we are calling m, that memory which is allocated for n variable is going to hold this 612. Why? Because we've passed that m to that n, so n is going to be 612. So this is when it comes back to in the main function, the value of m is not going to be changed. We just send this value to that function. So this parameter is going to hold this value. Why? Because we are sending that value to that parameter. And here we are saying value val equals to 5. We are calling that function and passing that 5 to that function. Okay, so in calling function, the val is 5, and the num, which is inside the even or odd function, it's a parameter in even or odd function, is going to be 5. We can change that name as much as we want, but the value inside the val variable remains unchanged. Okay.